Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. Well, what a day, what an extraordinary day it's been so far. So we have the Abbott government failing to destroy the carbon price, although that was the promise that they said they made. And we've just had the opportunity to hear such an erudite, and I know Hansard doesn't pick up irony and sarcasm, so perhaps I better say not such an erudite contribution from Senator McDonald, who accuses others of vilification, but I think he's a dab hand at vituperation. He's pretty good at that and misrepresentation. Today I'm rising to speak on this bill which will seek to abolish the Climate Change Authority and thus give additional succour to the government's anti-science, anti-evidence, climate change denial, and we've had an excellent example of that in Senator McDonald just now, that we've witnessed in this place since they came to government. And I know that there are members of the government who indeed do know that not only is climate change happening right now, that it is a serious, serious risk to our health, our environment and our prosperity as a nation and globally, but for some reason that I just cannot understand, given the privilege and the power that we have in this parliament to make decisions about the future, why they are resolutely silent and allowing the misrepresentation to occur. I keep thinking to myself, do those people think about their children? Do they think about their grandchildren? How do they live with the knowledge that they are actually actively allowing the government that they represent to tear away and go backwards in terms of what is effective action that we're taking at the moment? Not as effective as it could be, because the aspiration to only reduce emissions by 5% is, we all know, absolutely inadequate, and certainly that's one of the things that the Climate Change Authority that is being sought to be abolished by this legislation has been very clear in communicating to us, and I suppose that might be one of the many reasons that this government is seeking to actually silence that messenger, giving messages that they do not want to hear. So while the rest of the world has moved beyond the debate about whether climate change is occurring and accepted the irrefutable evidence that it is, and that it is indeed anthropogenic, in that it is being caused and contributed to by human activity, and have made decisive moves towards reducing emissions, not so this government. So we have a government that's attempting to abolish, repeal and ignore anything and anyone who disagrees with their reckless path, which is basically was designed to get them into power. The trouble is, once you're in power, you actually need to be doing things that are in the national interest. That's actually why you're elected in the first place, and that's not what we're seeing here. So it seems to me that the government thinks that if they abolish the Climate Change Authority and having already abolished the Climate Commission, if they repeal the price on pollution, which economists almost universally say is what is necessary to change the behaviour that's causing the problems we're confronting with climate change, and if they ignore the world's climate scientists, then perhaps there's a thought that climate change will no longer exist. It's a short-sighted, futile, reprehensible and irresponsible way to deal with one of the most significant challenges that we will face in this century, and that we as a parliament will be asked to deliberate on and make decisions about. It is a privilege to be standing in this parliament. It is a privilege that we have the trust of the Australian people with us to make those difficult, challenging and hard decisions, not only for the current generation but for future Australians. It's not one that I take lightly, but unfortunately it seems very clear that politics is going to prevail over policy, over principle in this particular on this issue. So today we've witnessed the government's ruthless attack on the price on pollution, not successful yet. So it lives on for at least some more days, and we'll see. Hope springs eternal, and who knows what will happen between now and next week. But the government isn't discriminating in their bid to rip down any skerrick of action on climate change. They will leave no stone unturned, it seems. So next on the list, the Climate Change Authority, an independent body established to provide balanced expert advice on a range of climate change issues. And maybe that's where the problem lies initially. Independent, balanced and expert. And what we've already seen in terms of decisions that have been made by this government in appointing hand-picked people to give them advice, where they know the result of the advice, they know what the views of those people will be. We know that those people will be giving ideological advice across the spectrum, whether it's in relation to renewable energy, whether it's in relation to education and the curriculum. This government has a practice of actually hand-picking people whose ideology they know and hearing that advice from them. And of course that isn't the case with the Climate Change Authority. It's independent, it's expert and it's balanced. They're the sort of words that severely disconcert this government, because they don't want to be hearing that kind of advice, information and evidence. The Climate Change Authority is required to take into account the latest science, and that's another word that probably creates great problems for some members of the government, the idea of science and what other countries are doing around the world, and make recommendations to the government about the emissions reductions targets, the carbon budgets, the renewable energy target, the carbon farming initiative and the National Greenhouse and Energy Reporting System. All those aspects of the framework which is designed to reduce Australia's carbon emissions and encourage innovation in clean technology and clean energy. These are all measures that are designed to usher Australia into the future. They're all measures designed to secure a safe and livable climate for our young people, the children, the young adults who will be inheriting the future that we leave for them, the legacy that we leave. But this government doesn't, of course, want to hear from the experts, doesn't want to hear from independent people and doesn't want to listen to the science. Their anti-climate agenda is completely ideological. No room for facts here, thanks very much. And of course we know the Climate Change Authority persists and insists on telling the government things it just doesn't want to hear. Things like that Australia should triple its minimum target for cutting greenhouse gas emissions by 2020. Things like that the current goal of 5% is inadequate, or that if we fail to significantly ramp up action on climate change, Australia will fall behind dramatically and not be able to play its global role in avoiding dangerous climate change. Or, as the Climate Change Authority Chair, Bernie Fraser, that well-known hippie, has said, sticking with the 5% target will make it virtually impossible for future generations.
Order. Senators on my left, please. Senator Wright, please continue.
So, as I said, the Climate Change Authority Chair, Bernie Fraser, that renowned hippie, that renowned wild extreme thinker, has said that sticking with the 5% target will make it, quote, virtually impossible for future generations trying to prevent a 2-degree rise in global temperatures. And that Australia is another thing that the Climate Change Authority insists on telling the government that they do not want to hear, is that Australia's minimum commitment is out of step with current global efforts, those of China and the US. Another thing they're saying that the government doesn't want to hear is that Australia should be reducing emissions by 19% from 2000 levels by 2020 if we are indeed to do our fair share of the heavy lifting. And we know this government's all about talking about the lifters and the leaners. Well, if we go down the track that the government is proposing in relation to our action on climate change, we will certainly be leaners. And as a result of the actions that we are failing to take, there will be many people within our own Pacific neighbourhood who will actually bear the brunt of that and will end up homeless because of the incursions of seawater on their low-lying homelands. And then, of course, what will we be doing then? Again, I suppose, given the track record that we have under this government of openly, and again I'm being sarcastic, of openly welcoming refugees to Australia, no doubt we will say, come and be here in Australia. You don't have homelands anymore. We haven't taken decisive action on climate change, so you're welcome to come here because we have a moral responsibility.